Hey everybody, Coke here, and today we're going to discuss a very well-written article done by the Associated Press. It basically talks about what happens at the federal courthouse with the ongoing protests and riots going on in Portland, and this article does a very good job of depicting both sides of the story, which is something that mainstream media doesn't like to do in general, and it tells the narrative from the protesters, and it tells the narrative from the federal officers who have to defend the federal courthouse. And I'm not really going to read any particular parts nor the whole article. It's a pretty long read, but I highly suggest you check it out for yourself. The link will be in the description as always. So it talks about the protests' point of view. They were basically talking about how they didn't understand why they were using tear gas, and they thought it was unjustified and stuff like that. And before they went to the federal courthouse, the protesters, they started to gather at one point at one part of the city, which was a few blocks away from the federal courthouse. They danced for a little bit with music playing, people with their own hand drums. And then they started marching, not into, but on the way to the federal courthouse into the night. And according to this article, it's not long before protesters start running towards the fence and using their body to slam towards the fence, basically using their weight against the fences. And then you had one guy who got arrested like that because he basically decided to try to climb over the fence. And this article also reports that people pretty soon were throwing stuff at the federal courthouse. Some people were throwing fireworks over the fences while people were trying to shake the fence over. And there's also video evidence as well of people trying to shake the fence to back this claim up. And there's this quote here from the article that goes, "A barrage of items came whizzing into the courthouse: rocks, cans of beans, water bottles, potatoes, and rubber bouncy bullets that caused the agents to slip and fall. Within minutes, the federal agents at the fence perimeter fired the first tear gas of the night." There was also reports of people flashing these high-powered green lasers at federal officers, trying to basically blind the officers. There was one officer who got a concussion because he was hit by a firework, and I can tell you, man, coming from someone who has a concussion before, concussions are no joke, and they should honestly be taken more seriously by society in general. And the officers, from their point of view, they were just pretty much, some of them were scared for their lives. Their sleep schedules were pretty messed up, which is kind of a given since they're defending a federal courthouse at night. And there are people who have actually spoken to the Associated Press, but they kept their names anonymous because they've been doxxed. There's one deputy officer in particular who's a part of this case where he doesn't want to give his name out because he's already been doxxed. His personal information is out there. And that's actually been happening quite a lot. There was one, I don't know if it was a police chief or someone with the feds, but they said the reason why federal officers don't have name tags is because a lot of people have been getting doxxed, particularly officers, and some of those officers have had their families threatened with violence. So it makes sense as to why these federal officers don't have name tags if that's the case. They do still have patches on their arm telling them which agency they're from, so I don't know why people are just like, oh, these are shadow squads from the federal government. And another thing worth noting is, look, to be fair here, I still don't like the idea of people being taken into unmarked vans. Now, from a legal perspective, they don't have to tell why the people are getting arrested. I don't think they should be arresting journalists unless the journalists themselves have been wrecking shit. But that being said, yeah, I still think that they should not be able to just put people in unmarked vans. I think that's still a bit messed up. However, to counter that own point, people might be trying to track those vans if they have markings on them and basically try to trace their location to some kind of headquarters or holding stations where they're being held, and then people might try to storm that facility. So there is that argument as well. And because people were throwing fireworks over there, some of the federal agents could not hear for a little bit. And notice in this article, it points out that they did not fire tear gas until people started throwing shit at the federal courthouse. That's something to be very mindful of. Now, in terms of if tear gas was the best method of crowd control in this situation, that's up for debate because after all, it is technically a violation of the Geneva Convention, but that would not apply in this case simply because this is not war. Or I guess some people want to think of this as a war, but it's really not. And the officers also mentioned how people will start up shit for 10 minutes and then they'll capture 10 seconds of what happens in these types of incidents. I think that's exactly right. People can easily start filming stuff at a certain point if it makes their side look good. It's kind of like when a comedian bombs and they get so emotionally riled up to the point where they start yelling and shrieking at people, and then someone starts recording, because that's just what happens in those situations. This can apply here, most definitely. Now, let's be fair, there are situations where it is police trying to instigate violence sometimes. That does happen, I'm pretty sure. But there's also incidents where fucking rioters are starting shit, and then when they start firing tear gas, all of a sudden they start filming that, saying, "Oh, look, they're throwing tear gas at us," when people were throwing fireworks over the fence and trying to knock this shit down. And more people need to condemn this type of behavior, because if people are going to make the argument, "Oh, these are just few acts of riots," you need to be able to condemn them if you want people to take your cause seriously. And on another note, people are saying, "Oh, well, these are just a few violent incidents." Well, first of all, I would suggest looking at pictures of Portland recently. Try to look at pictures from people who live there. There are stores being robbed, glass broken everywhere, graffiti everywhere. And that may not exactly classify as violent for graffiti, but it's still gross to vandalize a whole city like that, especially the downtown area. And as we mentioned in a previous video, there are downtown businesses struggling because nobody wants to go downtown anymore, and there's a bunch of businesses boarded up with plywood. And there's even some, I don't know if this was in Portland, but there's some local businesses having signs on their windows saying, "Please don't hurt us, we support BLM." Please tell me, after hearing all of that, you're not going to just say that this is not a mob, alright? Even though there are peaceful protesters out there, there is still a significant number of rioters out there that are causing shit to happen like this, to the point where business owners feel the need to put up signs saying, "Please don't hurt us." That sounds like they're being bullied, man, if you ask me personally. And the fact that the mainstream media, again, is not talking about the fact of how people are throwing fireworks over the fence, throwing rocks and cans of beans at federal agents, and even trying to blind them with lasers. Why would they leave this out? I don't understand. And why are people so willing to turn the other cheek on this type of shit? It really boggles my mind, man. It really does. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. I'll be sure to cover more updates on what's happening in Portland, because even though I'm a very, very tiny channel, I guess it's better than nothing. I mean, other people are doing it too, but I think the more people we have bringing attention to the violence that has been happening on the streets of Portland, every bit helps, in my opinion at least. If you like this video, please consider leaving a like. Thanks. This is Coke Noke signing off. Thank you again for watching.